The Friday Night Funkin' Glitch Legend V2 mod just dropped, and in this video I want to go ahead and explain the backstories of each of the characters that ended up being corrupted, and I also want to explain how they got corrupted. Some of the characters we know for sure, and some of them we have to kind of speculate. Now the first character I want to start out with is going to be Senpai, and I know looking at him it may be hard to tell because he does look a bit different than the original Senpai, but if the music doesn't give away, he does have the tie and the outfit that Senpai wears, obviously. Now I don't think anybody's surprised that Senpai ended up being corrupted. Most of the characters in the Friday Night Funkin' universe ended up actually being corrupted, and the fact that Senpai is trapped in a video game means that he's a super easy target. And since later on we'll see that Daddy Dearest is corrupted as well, it makes sense that Senpai is also corrupted because Daddy Dearest owns the game that Senpai is trapped within. Now one thing that I want to note about Senpai being corrupted and why it's kind of dangerous is that he was already pretty aggressive before he got corrupted, but if you notice in the mod we see that Spirit is actually lunging out of him, but in this mod he's not trying to destroy Senpai's body, instead he's trying to lunge at Boyfriend. And it seems that the corruption made Spirit more aggressive, but also made it to where he doesn't want to destroy his own host. The next group of characters are some of my favorite, and that's because they are from Teen Titan. And the first character that we see here is Robin, and a lot of people may not think it's a big deal that Robin gets corrupted, but Robin is actually very powerful, even as a kid. And in case you don't know, this version of Robin becomes Nightwing later on or when he's an adult, and we all know just how tough Nightwing is. But even as a kid, if you take away all of Robin's gadget, he's still a master at like hand-to-hand combat. He's literally considered to be a genius. And probably the most dangerous part is that he's also the leader of a bunch of even more powerful kids. As we see here, Cyborg and Batman were able to escape the corruption for now, but the people who did get corrupted is Starfire, Beast Boy, and probably the most impressive Raven. Now we all know that Beast Boy is powerful in his own right. He can basically turn into any animal and he can be very deadly when he wants to be. Starfire is basically an alien that can throw these energy balls. She can fly. She is very powerful in her own right, but the big deal here is definitely Raven. Now for those of you that don't know, Raven is by far the most powerful member in Teen Titans. She's basically the daughter of like this super powerful demon. Raven has the power to basically heal herself to some degree. She also can basically read your emotions and in a sense your mind a little bit. She knows telekinesis. She can also throw like these dark energy balls which can mess you up easily. She can literally levitate and pretty much fly. If she really wants to, she can literally manifest her own fears, meaning that anything that she's afraid of, if she doesn't just let that out naturally, she can just manifest it. And if that wasn't bad enough, she's basically just like a witch, meaning that she knows magic on top of all those other abilities that she has. And the worst part about her being corrupted is that it takes away her biggest weakness, and that was the fact that like her emotions were not balanced. And if she wasn't like in a zen state or she wasn't in control of her emotions, she basically couldn't use her abilities to their full potential. The darkness basically takes that away, right? Because it takes away a person's mind. So now she doesn't have to worry about being imbalanced or emotions. The darkness basically just turns her into a killing machine. I would say she's definitely in the top 5 most dangerous characters to ever be corrupted by the darkness in any Pibby mod. Now the next character that we see get corrupted is Batman, and while he may not be as dangerous as Raven on paper and in terms of like brute power, Batman himself is still a huge threat. As far as regular human beings go, Batman is like in the top 1% of like physical power and like mental ability, right? Like he's just a absolute unit with no enhancements. And the thing that makes him so dangerous is that even though the darkness kind of takes a person's mind a little bit, they still get to keep their instincts. And we all know that as Batman has time to prep and really think about what he's going to do, he can be extremely dangerous even to people who would definitely wipe him in any type of fair fight. So if the darkness allows Batman to keep some of his mental capacities, I think he's one of the more dangerous people to be corrupted, because think of how many people that he will trick into getting corrupted just by how cunning he is and the fact that he's basically like a ninja. He'll be able to corrupt people before they even know he's in the room. Next up on our list we have Oswald and Mickey, continuing the trend of old school cartoons being corrupted. It's kind of interesting that they decided to corrupt Oswald, because considering that he's supposed to be Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, usually he ends up getting out of trouble because obviously he's lucky. A couple of other characters that ended up being corrupted here, we get to see obviously Mickey there in the middle, but also Felix the Cat, which is a very old cartoon, and then we got Bendy there. And it's interesting that they put Bendy alongside of Felix and Mickey because apparently he was supposed to be based off their character design. Now I think it makes sense that Oswald and Mickey are shown being corrupted together because they are considered to be brothers. And I would assume that if one of them was in danger, the other one would probably risk his life to save them. Even in the old creepypastas, Oswald would always try to be at his brother's side, even if Mickey pushed him away, so I think it makes sense that those two are corrupted together. Next up on our list, we see SpongeBob, and I don't think anybody's surprised to see him corrupted because there's been plenty of mods where we actually seen a corrupted SpongeBob. One thing that I do find interesting here though is that now you see that he uses a spatula that he was using to make Krabby Patties in order to attack people, and the other thing is that most of his friends are also corrupted. In the actual song, we see Mr. Krabs, Squidward, and Patrick has all been corrupted, and I think it makes perfect sense that Mr. Krabs and Patrick are corrupted because Mr. Krabs, even though he's a greedy old crab, he does actually love SpongeBob like his own son. And of course, Patrick and SpongeBob are best friends, so it makes sense that they would be corrupted together. Something else that I find interesting here that may actually be a good thing is that the person that managed to not get corrupted in this universe is Plankton. And we all know that as far as raw intelligence goes, Plankton is probably the smartest person in the SpongeBob series, so if anybody can actually fight against the darkness, it would be him. So while he may not be the most trustworthy person, he is a good person to have on your team if your world is literally about to end. The next person that we see in the mod is Monica from the Doki Doki Literature Club. She was like the president of the literature club in the game if you played it. Now this one is probably one of the least problematics, at least if you look at her actual abilities in the game, because most of her control actually takes place in the video game that she resides in. Yes, she has the ability like to infiltrate your computer and kind of like learn your name and like speak to you directly, but she can't really do anything to you. Now with that being said, if the darkness gives her abilities outside of that, I guess she could be a threat. And considering that she can control everything in like her game universe, I guess she could corrupt the other girls. So this one right here is definitely one of the least problematic ones, unless the darkness extends her power like into the real world. Then she would be a huge problem because she's definitely crazy. The next character that we get to see corrupted is Tails, and this one's kind of a surprise to me because usually Sonic is the one that gets corrupted. The good news here though is that Tails is significantly weaker than Sonic, so if one of them was to get corrupted, Tails is definitely the better option. And that's not to say that Tails is weak, but he's definitely not as strong or fast as Sonic the Hedgehog. And as far as how I think he actually ended up getting corrupted, I think that Tails probably would have sacrificed himself to make sure that Sonic didn't get corrupted, because while Tails may not be as strong or fast as Sonic, he definitely has a bigger heart and he's definitely fearless when it comes to things like that. And while Sonic may be the leader of his group, he's definitely not the smartest person. Tails is literally considered to be a genius, especially with anything that takes like technology, while Sonic is kind of a goofball in a way. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Tails had to sacrifice himself to make sure that Sonic was able to survive. Another good thing that Sonic and Boyfriend have going for him is that they also have Dr. Eggman on their side, and while he is kind of seen as a goofball, he's actually a genius, so if there's somebody that's really going to help stop the corruption, he would be the one. Now this next character, some of you may not be familiar with, but he's from a old anime that I believe is called Seiya, which is actually his name, or his full name being Pegasus Seiya. If I remember correctly, he was a part of a group of warriors called the Saints, and they basically fought for Athena, which was the god of war and wisdom, I believe. And this group basically acted as defenders for the earth. Now what's dangerous about this character is that he was extremely powerful. And just like most old school anime characters, he has that trait about himself where he never gives up on a fight. And now that he's been taken over by the corruption, I assume that he's just a mindless fighting machine. A sad fact about Pegasus is that in his original anime, I'm pretty sure he was only 13 years old, so he's definitely on the younger side of people to be corrupted. The next character that we see in the mod is going to be Fred Flintstone, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that he ended up being corrupted, because if you remember from the original Pibby trailer, we actually got to see Fred actually slide into the corruption. I believe his universe is actually one of the first ones to be taken over, and I believe this is why we get to see other 60s cartoon characters in the background along with Fred Flintstone. I guess the good news with this one though is that we don't actually get to see his kids or his wife as being corrupted, and since we see that Barney is actually still there uncorrupted, maybe there is hope for his universe. And even if not, Fred is definitely one of the least dangerous people to be corrupted. He's basically just a caveman with a club, which is a lot easier to handle than some of the people that we're going to see in this mod who got corrupted. Next up, we see Bugs Bunny, and this isn't really a surprise that he ended up being corrupted because he's another one just like Fred who we actually got to see be corrupted in the original Pibby trailer. And I think in a way it kind of makes sense that these older 1940-ish cartoons are the first ones to be taken over, because realistically they don't really have any chance of fighting against the darkness. As iconic of a character as Bugs Bunny is, he doesn't really have any defenses or any weapons that he can use to actually defend himself. But it is kind of sad to see nostalgic characters actually be taken over. Next on our list we have Red Bird, aka Red J Bird, and we know him from the Angry Birds game. Now something I found interesting about Red is that he has a lot of control over the corruption, which if you notice a lot of characters don't. Once they get corrupted, they just basically lose their mind, but they can't literally use the corruption to their benefit. Red is one of the few characters that can. Along with obviously being able to use his sword, he's also able to manipulate the sludge to actually summon arms to smash down anything in his path. And you may also notice that in his song he is fighting alongside Pea Shooter, and that's because when he got corrupted, he actually traveled to the Plant vs. Zombie universe and he ended up siding with the plants. So even though most of these people are still corrupted by the darkness, they still kind of keep their base instincts and they're still at war with each other even though they're corrupted. Now if you remember the first Glitch Legend mod, you'll remember that the big zombie robot in the background was actually being piloted by Tort and also Zomboss. In this updated version of the mod, it seems that they're no longer in here, so that big zombie mech is just kind of going wild in the background. Next up on our list, we see that some of the Fox cartoons got corrupted. Right here, we see that the Simpsons have been taken. And this right here should not be a surprise because in many of the mods before this, we saw that Family Guy was taken down. And basically, the Simpsons is just an older, funnier version of Family Guy. So of course, they would end up getting taken as well. Now, something that I find interesting though is that Homer is the one that got taken and Bart is the one that's fighting against him. If you remember the old animation, they used to fight all the time in the house, usually with Homer actually choking him. So I'm not surprised to see Homer being the one that ends up getting corrupted. Next up on our list, we're going to talk about Gumball Watterson, the blue cat, aka the main protagonist of the Amazing World of Gumball series. Most of you are also probably familiar with his brother Darwin and his little sister Anais. And something that I find interesting about Gumball's character is that when you watch his show, he's actually a pretty optimistic character and he's kind of smart in his own way, especially when it comes to making any type of scheme. And something else that I really like about his character is that he's very protective about the people that he loves. And if I had to guess at how he ended up being corrupted, I would think it's by trying to save other people in his family or his friends. Something sad here that we also get to see is that his mother ends up being corrupted as well, and I probably think that she ended up being corrupted trying to save her son. Something I find ironic is that in the show, Gumball is always a little bit cynical towards society, and now that he's been corrupted by the darkness, he's actually attacking society. So in a way, he was kind of like the perfect target for the darkness. The one good thing here though is that we get to see for sure that Darwin ends up getting away from the darkness, at least for now. The next character we're going to talk about on our list is going to be Pico. Now the funny thing is that when the corruption first came to the Friday Night Funkin' universe, Pico was actually there with girlfriend and boyfriend. The only reason boyfriend was able to survive the effects of the darkness is because girlfriend basically put a barrier around him which cannot be broken unless he loses a rap battle. If you guys played the Sonic.exe mod, you're probably familiar with this technique and how powerful it was because it basically kept Sonic.exe, who was very powerful, from actually getting boyfriend's soul. The downside with this though is that she was only powerful enough to save boyfriend, meaning that she had to sacrifice herself, and of course he couldn't save Pico because he just didn't have the power to do so. Now as Pico was being taken down by the corruption, boyfriend actually reached out for him to try to save him, but he wasn't able to. Of course, the darkness is way too powerful. The only thing that boyfriend was able to grab from Pico is his actual gun, which is why we see in most of the Friday Night Funkin' Pibby mods that boyfriend is actually rocking Pico's Uzi. The next character that we see in this mod is actually Ben 10, and this one is interesting because Ben 10 is definitely a hero, but this version of him is very young, and if you watch the Ben 10 series, you know that as a kid he was very cocky and very immature. And in the defense of Ben 10, I mean, he was a little kid that was given an absurd amount of power, so I'm not saying this to be mean about the character, it's just what he was at the time. Now, as far as how he actually probably became corrupted, I think it's pretty easy, especially if you watch the show. Not only was Ben very cocky, but he was also very heroic. He would always try to throw himself into danger, especially if it was to save somebody else. And the one thing that he was really bad at doing was assessing the actual situation. And something huge that I actually remember from the show that was a big deal was that for a long time, he didn't truly understand the power that the Omnimatrix actually had. So a lot of times he would end up unlocking an ability that would end up doing more harm than good simply because he didn't understand how to use it. And if we're also being honest, he didn't know how to use all the abilities and the powers that the different aliens that he could turn into actually had. So I think that the reason Ben 10 ends up being corrupted by this darkness is just because he didn't have the experience or the power to actually escape it. There's been much stronger heroes that have been taken down by the darkness, so Ben 10 realistically probably didn't even have a chance. One thing that I feel like I have to mention though is that on the sideline over there with boyfriend, we actually see Kevin, who is another character from the Ben 10 series, and I find it so funny that this kid ended up surviving because it kind of makes sense in a real way. I felt like in this show, no matter what actually came after this kid or how much trouble he was in, he always managed to survive. He was like a human version of a cockroach. The next character that we need to talk about is going to be Bill Cipher, and this is the main antagonist from the Gravity Falls series on the Disney Channel. Now, what I find interesting about this character is that he's probably one of the most dangerous characters to actually be corrupted because he is extremely powerful. Now, I say this because in the show, we see that he starts the Weird Mageddon, which is basically his version of the Armageddon, where he basically spreads darkness and insanity across the world. And if that isn't enough, he also has the ability to like control gravity, light manipulation. He's extremely old, meaning that he doesn't really age the same way we do. And if all that isn't bad enough, he also has the ability to manipulate time. Now, you may be wondering how a character that is this powerful is actually able to be caught by the darkness, and I think it's because of his one weakness, which is his ability to be super cocky. He knows that he's very powerful, and he knows that he is a dream demon, meaning that he can exist in a different landscape than the physical world if he wants to. And I think that he underestimated just how aggressive and how overwhelming the darkness could be, and he ended up getting taken just like the rest of the characters from the Gravity Falls series. And as a side note, does anybody else find it super funny that some of the most powerful characters to be corrupted are also the most goofy looking characters? I'm thinking about, of course, Bill Cipher, but also like Uncle Grandpa, who is extremely powerful and happened to be a victim of the corruption as well. Now, the other characters from Gravity Falls that actually become corrupted are Dipper and Mabel, but them becoming corrupted isn't really a huge surprise because they're pretty much just humans. Yes, they have a few tricks up their sleeves, but there's no way that they're getting away from this darkness when somebody like Bill Cipher is getting caught by it. So realistically, nobody's surprised that they end up getting corrupted. But based off the TV show, we can assume that they probably got corrupted because they tried to investigate what the darkness was. In the show, they are known for going out and actually seeking out the paranormal, the weird, so it doesn't really surprise us they would probably go try to see what's going on with this corruption. And in turn, they ended up being corrupted themselves. Now, the next Baxter characters that get corrupted are actually from the Fairly Odd Parents, and I don't think anybody is really that surprised to see that Vicky ends up getting corrupted. We know that she's just a human teenage girl who happened to be a babysitter and also happened to be a very wicked human being for almost no reason. But the fact that the Fairly Odd Parents and Timmy end up getting corrupted is very concerning because even though the Fairly Odd Parents may not be the most powerful beings in the universe, they are fairly strong. The only logical ways I can think that the Fairly Odd Parents will end up getting corrupted is if one, Cosmo came up with one of his crazy ideas that for whatever reason Wanda and Timmy usually just go along with, and that ends up getting them into a situation where they can't actually grant a wish or get themselves out of trouble with the darkness. Or if something happened to their baby, Poof. We all know that they will go crazy if anything happens to their baby, so it could be possible that something happens to Poof and they end up getting separated from Timmy. And in turns, when the darkness comes, Timmy's not able to make a wish to get rid of it or to get himself out of trouble, and that's how they all end up getting corrupted. The next character that we see in the mod is going to be Tom from Tom and Jerry, and I don't really think we need to go into this one too much. Tom used to get outsmarted by a tiny little mouse, so we know dang well that he's not going to be able to get away from the corruption. What I will say though, it is kind of sad to see some of the more nostalgic characters being taken by the darkness. Because I don't care who you are, you can be 50 or you can be 6. Tom and Jerry has a spot in your heart. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click this video on the screen here, subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.